REsource Nation. We're here with Kristen Messerly and Dave Savage.
Hey.
We got a treat for you today. We got two superstars and one gray-haired man interviewing some awesome people. We're at the Hyatt in Seattle at the Lenders One conference. Appreciate you guys carving out time for the REsource. This is huge.
This is huge. I can't believe this show you guys put together here.
I know.
Well,
Nice.
somebody asked us earlier how long you guys been doing this. I was like, a pretty long time, 10 years. And they were shocked. And I wasn't sure if I should be offended or like, thank you. I don't know. But yeah, 10 years, man.
Yeah, well, you guys do a great job, and this is next level. You know, just a podcast, video, very cool.
We keep trying to evolve. Again, we've been doing this 10 years. So this year we started the masterclass series, and now we have kind of the podcast style show. So relatively new, but again, I don't want to be a dinosaur. So we got to continue to evolve. So
Well, that's how you roll, man. You're always changing,
I'm trying.
always growing.
Yeah, RC and Aaron continue to push us in the right direction, and I'm the old dinosaur like pulling us down. So anyways, I got you guys for a short amount of time. We're about to get kicked out of this really cool space. And so you just got done. You were on stage speaking about breaking into new markets. Is that
Yep.
how'd that go?
It was
You felt
great.
good?
Yeah, it was fun.
How would you rate yourself?
I felt I brought my A
Crushed
game.
it?
So yeah, don't mind to say I crushed it today.
Nice, I love it.
But yeah, we had an urban planner and a policy analyst on the panel as well.
Nice.
So it was cool because we had, I think, a different conversation than these typical panels. So
What were the big takeaways real fast before we get into our conversation from that conversation?
big takeaways were that we need to bring all the stakeholders in a community to the table and really work together. Like, it's not enough just to say, I'm going to go after these new markets or minority markets or whatever. You really need to understand the policy issues and local community issues and the influencers and work together to improve
Love
the
it.
community and bring more people into the market.
That's awesome. So that's kind of right up your alley. You're with cultural outreach. You speak to underserved communities and millennials, and really, it's a space that's interesting that nobody's really owned, and you kind of moved into that, and I love it. I want to pick both your brains though about. That's a challenge that we just talked about. And there's so many challenges facing our industry right now. We're going to get into some of them with some of the new mergers with RealG, Amazon and Quicken. Dave, you just rolled the new advice engine, and financial literacy continues to be a challenge, which if you're a lender, you definitely got to hook up with Savage's team and check it out. It's really, really cool. Our adoption rates as an industry guys are low with this type of stuff. And Dave's been providing value at a super high level for the industry for so long, which I appreciate. And we definitely need to be leveraging that. That's another challenge, financial literacy. I'm sorry, but the CD and the LE alone aren't enough. But that's not my question. But if you had to pick one of them, all the things that are happening in real estate, because we have realtors that watch and lenders, real estate and lending, what would you guys say is our biggest challenge? I know that's tough because there's so many happening right now. But if you had to just pick one right now, what would it be? Who wants to go first?
Well, I guess I'll go first.
You
I'll
can
give
do
you a
it, yeah.
minute. So I think we're at this point where it's very clear to everybody that they need to change. They need to upgrade how they deliver a consumer experience, how they leverage video.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just changing behavior. I think that is the single biggest challenge people have. When I talk about the advice engine, I'll speak to what I think we need to do as an industry, what companies need to do, what individuals need to do, give some ideas. But I just think, rising our skills to deliver the consumer experience that consumers expect. The mortgage industry's, if you look at how we've been quoting rates, it hasn't changed in 40 years.
Yeah.
We've innovated with how we take an app now,
Good
point
point,
of sale.
actually. Yeah.
So that's innovative, but how we actually, educate a consumer, how we deliver rates and fees hasn't changed. And that's just one example. There's
Yeah.
lots of them that haven't changed.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I really think that education and how lenders are educating consumers through their marketing and in their communities is the biggest challenge. I think there needs to be education to lenders and loan officers on how to reach those markets and how to provide the customer experience. But to your point about financial literacy, in our experience in working in those markets, there's just such a lack of financial literacy in millennials and this generation, and in a lot of the communities that lenders are trying to reach. And so I think people don't even realize how much we use lingo that people don't understand, and how important it is to be providing education in order to allow people to connect with you.
Right. And I was guilty of that. I said LE and CD.
Yeah.
So for consumers watching, or maybe even realtors, that's a loan estimate and a closing disclosure. And so if you're
We do
a
it all
consumer,
day, every day.
I know we get it. I actually preach, so I just broke my own rule. Like nobody knows what an LOE is. So we call a borrower and be like, I need an LOE. What's a letter of explanation? We're trying to explain X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So I just broke my own rule. Thank you for calling me out on that. But if you're a consumer watching, or realtor or lender, I mean, there's more to your loan. It's 30 years of your life that you're giving a commitment than just 2 pieces of paper or 3 pieces of paper, which is where, Dave's technology comes in. But you're right. I mean, this is where I don't want to fight the evolution of the industry. I don't know that, and we just had a show called, the one-stop shop for real estate lending. I think some of it works in different spaces. I don't know that it's going to work with, buy, sell, finance, insurance all in one space. But to Dave's point, yes, we could have a POS that's faster. Yes, we could deliver the education piece better. It's really interesting that nobody's really pushed on that. I mean, you have, but there's not a huge push outside of that to deliver and educate the consumer better. And this is my point. We've been kind of conditioned to Amazonize everything, push button, get whatever. And we sign things all the time. And this is the bad thing about DocuSign. We don't really know what we're clicking on or attesting to. Mm-hmm. And that's because that's how we bought stuff on eBay or Amazon, maybe even bought a car. But we need to pump the brakes, in my opinion. You guys, I'll ask if you agree or disagree when it comes to, housing. It shouldn't be. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. It's not push button, sorry, Quicken, not calling you out, but get mortgage. Mm-hmm. There's more to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Agree, disagree, am I off?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. I think consumers this is a mortgage coach, mission, but I think consumers really want to understand what they're signing and what they're getting into, but they often either they just trust the professional that they're working with, or they have so much fear around it that they step back and they hesitate a lot about getting into the marketplace. Like we just hosted a millennial event, home buying event in LA, and we had 40 millennials come out, and so many of them said that they had started the search online, they'd started looking into things, and then just got extremely overwhelmed and didn't know what to trust or who to trust, and they didn't feel like they could reach out to someone because they knew they'd get sold to if they did that. And so if they're able to actually clearly see these are my options and be empowered with that information, then they know that they're making that decision for themselves. So.
Yeah, and you said a word that I think is so important: options. And I've watched your show for years, and I don't know if you use this term, but extreme transparency. Consumers need transparency. Consumers need options, and then they won't feel sold to. It's all about giving them options in every aspect of that. Just simple things like someone's thinking about buying a home, down payment options.
Yeah.
Purchase price options. They don't want to be, they don't want what they can search on Google and get. And if you give them one option, they feel like you're pushing something, or they don't feel informed.
So you're talking about millennials, and I know, again, that's a space that you filled quickly, which was awesome because it's like millennials became a term and then they became mysterious. We don't know how to handle them. We don't talk to them. We don't know how to hire them. So it's still funny to me that that's a mystery, but I appreciate you kind of filling that void. But so for lenders and realtors watching, or any entrepreneur really, you talked about millennials kind of being, kind of had that, like this mindset when they got overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. I think everybody mistakenly just believes that, well, they're young and they want to just leverage technology to the max. But can you speak to that? It doesn't sound like that's what you were saying. You're saying they maybe wanted more of a conversation. Yeah,
definitely. We've been pretty surprised. We've been surveying millennials across the country for a while now, and hopefully going to release a report on this next year. But basically just wanting to hear directly from people, what is your thought process? And so many people are saying that they really want to talk to someone. They feel like what they read doesn't tell them what their situation is like, which again is a great thing about Mortgage Coach, is giving something that's personalized, customized to their what is true to them, And so I think, and a lot of people that we talked to said that they felt nervous that if they talked to someone that they would get sold to, or they'd get laughed at, or they, they should know some things before going there. But I think, they don't know who to reach out to, and there's just a lack of trust.
So I'm going to throw you guys a curveball because I was just thinking, I wonder if this applies in real estate. So mortgage is complex, right? There's a lot of money on the line. And we should do some homework when we have, we're taking on a $300,000 loan. There should be a conversation. But I wonder, you mentioned earlier, and I think the stat's still 9 out of 10 people find their house online. Do you guys think that same conversation's had in real estate, or do you think they're comfortable buying a house, filling out a contract like with the Redfin style strategy or a Zillow style strategy, which is just kind of filling the address and purchase price? Or do you think this will apply in real estate as well?
I mean, what I'm hearing is people are very comfortable filling things out online, and they don't realize, they have no clue what complexity goes into the actual, contract negotiation and the whole transaction. So I think realtors need to do a little bit better job in a lot of cases of explaining what their role is in that process. And so, when I sold my home, I chose to not use a realtor, and the person buying didn't have a realtor either, and it was a total mess. And I wish I interviewed a bunch of realtors, and I'm like, why didn't any of you tell me how hard this is going to be? Yeah. So, and then, but I do think that in competitive markets, that also people are getting overwhelmed with the process of looking for a home and then losing out to another bid. And so there becomes a higher demand for realtors in those markets too.
Yeah. The realtors are screaming at the screen when I started that question because they're like, there's more to it, Ryan, than just filling out tabs. Yeah. I understand. I got your back. I'm trying to fight back for all these changes. But I think that's the assumption that it's just filling out an address and a purchase price. And you're right. There are so many of those situations. It's not the first time I heard that. Mm-hmm. They always go wrong. Yeah. And it's even just having a third party, a disinterested or interested third party in there trying to, between you and the seller at the very, very least is needed. But you're right. There's so many variables that can happen. And I think other people outside of traditional real estate are trying to diminish it to where it's just like a DocuSign. And there's more to it. I mean, Dave, you work with everybody in the industry on the lending side, but do you agree on the real estate side, or do you feel like that's going to be a continued challenge for realtors moving forward?
Well, no, I think at both spaces, the best teacher will always have a seat at the table. Yeah. So if you could be an educator, and I do think if you're local, referral based, the stakes have changed. Like the digital mortgage, the iBuyer, technology coming in and its ability to execute the transaction. Yeah. Like whether it's real estate or mortgage, we have justified a lot of our compensation and spend a lot of our time on the transaction, being a problem solver, and the transaction, by 2027, it will be unrecognizable on both sides. Yeah. And so all the differentiation needs to happen in the education experience and the advice experience. And I would put a challenge out to realtors and to mortgage professionals that your advice experience needs to be so tangibly valuable that people would kind of check for it. Yeah. Like I would pay you $1,000 to sit down and help me pick the right mortgage. And I'll get my transaction over here. And I just made that number up, but there needs to be that type of tangible value. And you need to be able to explain yourself, to the point like the realtors were not able to convince you. Mm-hmm. You not only need to deliver that education experience, you need to be able to articulate that at the point of sale in a way that's unique and different on both sides. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And really the two commodities I think that every realtor and marketer needs to work on is leadership. We need to be better leaders, and marketings. That's the other thing. Like a great marketer will always have a seat at the table.
Right.
And a great marketer in this market is educating constantly.
Absolutely.
And I think there's so many people that realtors and loan officers who are waiting too long to really put that brand forward, that they're going to be an educator and advisor. And so, one millennial home buyer that I recently talked to was saying that she realized halfway through the transaction that she wasn't going to shop around for another loan officer or whatever, that she had chosen a great guy because he would answer her questions and she could trust him. But it would be great if earlier on she knew that he had laid out the whole process and responded to, created a custom plan for her. Right. That way she understood that right away and wasn't rate shopping from there.
Yeah, Dave, you were saying their advice should be so good that somebody'd write a check. I don't know if you guys know, but Northwest MLS was the first MLS to change, a huge change. We just talked about it with Brian Steven from National Real Estate Post, but they changed, and it's very, very new. And that scenario will happen very quickly because the change is no longer is the buyer side commission factored in just automatically on a listing. And so the change is, if there is, it'll be noted on like the Redfin or Zillow listing on the MLS feed. It'll show buyer's commission is X. So it's going to bring that conversation to light quickly. And the other change is they don't have to factor that in. So you may see houses only listed with the listing commission, which is only 3%. So what you said is very, very true. You're going to have to say, hey, there's no commission in here for me to sell this house. So is my advice, is my education worth, like you said, $1,000? Because they may have to write that. That's
Well, it
never
has
been
to
a
be
scenario
thousands
before.
of dollars. You know, I mean, but it needs to. You need to have tangible, obvious value. And one of the keynotes that I'm doing right now is just all like how to be the obvious choice. You know, I think that should be the bullseye for every realtor, every mortgage professional. How can I be the obvious choice? So when you really look at the companies that are killing it, Amazon, they're the obvious choice in buying anything. You know, everybody's got a big bank app. So while they may not be the obvious choice in a mortgage, I mean, everybody's got one of their apps. You look at, you know, Uber, you know, Netflix, you know, they've all figured out how to create a business model of convenience, of transparency, of advice, where they're the obvious choice. And we need to do that. And we can do that. As a local provider, I do believe for those that change and create an obvious choice platform, I think the best years are ahead.
Yeah. I think the big takeaway just listening to both of you today is so many realtors and lenders get so frustrated, and they kind of will yell at the screen if they're watching something on social and be like, that's not what real estate is. That's not what, you don't diminish mortgage to Quicken only. Okay. To your point, she didn't know, guys. Like, that means that we got to do a better job at, creating content and collateral and educate the consumer. Like, that's on us. There's 1 million realtors. There's 100,000 independent mortgage bankers. We can put out some really good content. So that's a huge takeaway for us. Again, if you're upset about the narrative, take that narrative back, control it, educate. We're getting chased out because we have a really cool spot here in Seattle. And so we're going to have to cut our interview short. But guys, I thank you so much for your time. If you have questions for Dave or Kristen, hit us up in the chat log below. Just hit the @ symbol. And thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.